solve a murder.
The apartment and get some stuff for Sam for Ellen's funeral, like clothes, photos, things like that. According to a statement from the property manager, she checked with police to make sure that this would be okay. And they basically told her, well, there aren't any restrictions. It's not a crime scene, so yeah, it's fine. Do whatever.
What?
Yeah, but the property manager, pushes back a little,
Like, are you sure?
even to the point where she's like, it didn't seem right to have people in there when there was literally still blood all over the kitchen.
Yeah.
So she asked police, what do I do about that? And they told her that, that's not our department's responsibility. Basically, people have to handle cleaning up crime scenes on their own. So they recommended a cleaning service called Crime Scene Cleanup.
Pretty straightforward. Cool.
Before letting anyone in, the property manager had a video recording made of the apartment, basically the condition it was in, as legal protection for Venice Lofts against claims of stolen items or damage. Then she booked the service, which sent people to do what they're hired to do. They cleaned up a crime scene. And when they were done, the property manager told Sam's relatives they could come in. Here's Sandy Greenberg again.
Sam's cousin and uncle went back into the apartment, and they removed Ellen's engagement ring, her handbag, her car keys, her 2 computers, her cell phone.
What? Why were they allowed to take all of Ellen's stuff?
Well, so the property manager is in the apartment when Sam's relatives are there, but even if she knew what they were taking, which I don't even know if she did, I don't think she could have done anything. There are no police there saying, hey, don't let them take stuff. They specifically knew they were coming in.
Well, and assuming, these are Sam's relatives, he sent them maybe with a list.
Yeah.
They're in getting what they're supposed to get.
Yeah, and she's the property manager.
Why argue?
Yeah, she, this isn't her job to, worry about this. She's just making sure nothing happens to the apartment. So according to CBS Philadelphia, when police realize that they're dealing with a homicide, they get a search warrant and go back to the apartment to look for evidence on Friday, January 28th. But by that point, they're looking over a crime scene that was literally professionally cleaned and sanitized. And items that could be really important have been removed by the family of the victim's fiance.
Yeah, they're practically looking at a model apartment right now.
Now, January 28th also happens to be the day of Ellen's funeral and Sam's birthday. Ellen's family is Jewish, and traditionally in the Jewish faith, burials take place as soon as possible after a death. Her service is held at Bethel Temple Sanctuary in Harrisburg. Ellen's cousin, Brett Schwab, told us that he will never forget that day.
During the funeral, Ellen's father made a speech and announced to the audience that, for those who haven't heard, the Philadelphia police just determined that the manner of death was in fact a homicide. It was hushed whispers and everyone staring wide-eyed at each other, unsure what to say.
After the funeral, everyone goes back to Ellen's grandmother's home, and it seems based on everything our reporter Nina learned from interviewing the family, this is where the relationship between Ellen's parents and Sam and his family starts to really fracture. At one point, Josh, her dad, says to Sam, "You do realize that you're the prime suspect."
What was Sam's reaction when Josh said to him, you're the prime suspect?
He started crying. He was in one corner of the room, and he moved over to his mother, and she's comforting him, and he's carrying on.
After that exchange, the Goldbergs don't join Josh and Sandy to sit Shiva, which is a Jewish tradition that takes place after the funeral when the family stays home and people visit and comfort them. But the Shiva for Ellen hasn't even started before police start to downplay the medical examiner's homicide determination. The day after the funeral, a lieutenant tells the Philadelphia Inquirer that evidence had surfaced which made suicide more likely, and that detectives are looking into some, quote, mental issues that Ellen may have had.
What is he even talking about? And, don't even get me started on the incredibly insensitive way to speak about someone who might have been struggling with their own mental health.
He doesn't say specifically what he's talking about that's leading him to this conclusion. What I do know from a police report is that on that same day, Saturday, Sam's uncle James, who at the time was a prominent Philadelphia attorney, brought detectives the laptops and cell phone that they had taken from the condo. And by this time, investigators had spoken to Ellen's psychiatrist, Dr. Berman, and they'd subpoenaed her treatment records. But Dr. Berman told investigators that Ellen was a new patient who had come in for 3 recent sessions after dealing with severe anxiety for a couple of months. And Ellen had told Dr. Berman that she was having trouble at work, she was feeling pressured, she was feeling overwhelmed, but she wasn't having thoughts of taking her own life. And in those sessions, Ellen had never said anything bad about Sam. She told Dr. Berman that he was wonderful, and the psychiatrist noted that Ellen smiled when she talked about him. Ellen also had denied that Sam was verbally or physically abusive. The psychiatrist prescribed Ellen medication, which she was kind of uneasy about taking. She first tried Zoloft and then switched to a low dose of Xanax. And when those didn't work, Dr. Berman put her on Ambien and Klonopin to just help her get some sleep. A few weeks after her death in February, Ellen's toxicology report comes back, showing that she did have low doses of Klonopin and trace amounts of Ambien in her system, just like she was supposed to. And the toxicology didn't show any signs of the Xanax or the Zoloft, so she wasn't mixing medications or over-medicating. But when investigators look into the medications that were in her system, both do list suicidal thoughts and behaviors as potential side effects, which only bolsters the police's theory that Ellen did this to herself. And they think that even more when some of the physical evidence comes back. According to an article on PennLive.com, an analysis of the blood stains on the knife and Ellen's clothing only turn up her DNA.
Okay, but none of that explains how Ellen could have stabbed herself in the back of the neck and head so many times.
So I guess the theory is that she just reached around and did it? I mean, I haven't seen anything showing that the angles of Ellen's wounds are 100% physically impossible for a person to self-inflict. But the angles aren't even really the main issue. Dr. Osborne noted during the autopsy that there was a cut to Ellen's dura, which is the protective covering around the spinal cord. What he wasn't sure of is whether Ellen's spinal cord itself had been injured, which is obviously a huge deal because if the spinal cord was injured by the stab wounds to the back of Ellen's neck, the question becomes, would she have been able to keep stabbing herself?
Oh.
If she was incapacitated, then obviously someone else delivered that final blow to her chest.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered that. So what did the police do with that information?
Well, according to the reporting by Stephanie Farr, detectives suggest hiring an outside neuropathologist to look at a portion of Ellen's spinal cord and figure out the answers to those questions. So Dr. Osborne